I have been obsessed with wildlife for pretty much my entire life. I grew up fishing and hunting. I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau on television, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, wanting to go into the wild, and whether I was in a duck blind or whether I was fishing or whether I had a camera in my hand, I was always pursuing wildlife. And I grew up in such a way that I was taught that we're supposed to respect wildlife and wild ground. And I've been so blessed to have a career as a wildlife journalist, writing for wildlife and fishing and hunting magazines and doing a radio program and doing lectures around the world. And we started doing our ministry work, and our ministry mission is to bring the redeeming love of Christ to hurting children through wildlife encounters. I realized real quickly that one of the problems was that a lot of these kids who are facing challenges didn't feel they had a purpose in life. And I'm sitting over here going, how can I bring my career to our ministry in a better way? And the idea really has become, I really believe it was breathed from God, to take the skills I've learned as a wildlife conservationist, someone who promotes wildlife conservation, and bring it to these kids. Train them how to shoot photos, train them how to stand in front of a camera and talk, teach them about wildlife, and let them become wildlife conservation ambassadors. Who better to understand hurting wildlife being persecuted and poached, and habitat being destroyed, than kids facing challenges? They can totally relate to that. And one of the most amazing examples of sort of the inspiration for this, we were at a place called Wyo Ranch headquarters, a very famous ranch. We did a Wild Wish that was a giraffe encounter. And on the way out, the boys and a little girl who came along on that trip as well, were all in this truck, and they're talking about wanting to go out and see buffalo. And a herd of longhorn cattle crosses the road, and we jump out to go shoot photos, and then a buffalo walked out. And one of the kids goes, "Look what God sent us." And then a white buffalo walked out. Now the kids were pumped, but I was way more pumped than them, I think, because the white buffalo, according to Native American tradition, was a symbol of hope. And here I was with kids that had been facing really tough situations, and they just literally, in the very breaths as we walked out, talked about buffalo, and the white buffalo walked out. So I went back to the ranch, found the buffalo again, got really, really good video footage, and it made me start thinking about different ways to integrate children in wildlife conservation and telling a story. And then we had an opportunity for a young girl named Rihanna and her friend Lauren to do a sea turtle release at the Amos Research Keep down in Port Aransas. They got to take injured green sea turtles that had been rehabilitated and put them back into the Gulf of Mexico. It was such a freeing moment to see these young ladies release these turtles that have been through so much as they have been through so much. So in my career now, both professionally and in the ministry, my goal now is not only to bring the kids the love of Christ through wildlife encounters, but also to bring wildlife conservation to the forefront. I am seeking a higher calling to go much deeper in telling the story of what's going on in the world with wildlife. I really believe that if I'm in this position, I should be telling stories that other people aren't seeing, because I'm seeing things out there that I'm like, I don't see anything written on that. I don't see that on any television shows. And if people don't hear the story of what's really going on with wildlife, with some of the incredible problems with poaching, for example, and habitat loss and other things, then who's going to respond to this? I respond to the conservation call because my dad brought me deer hunting as a kid and brought me fishing, and I knew if we took too many deer, there would be no deer. I knew if we went fishing and the water was polluted, it wasn't good to eat those fish. So now I want to take that same kind of ethic and go into the wild and let people know if we don't take action now, there could be problems, not just years down the road. In a few years, we could be losing species. And the exciting thing is now, we're training kids through the Wild Wishes program and other things we're doing at Kingdom Zoo Wildlife Center to come along for that ride and not be the next generation of wildlife conservationists, but be the now generation.